Welcome to All the F Words,
a podcast where two writer friends nearly 30 years apart explore everything we give an F about. I'm Gabby Moskowitz.
And I'm Joanne Green. On each episode of All the F Words, we'll focus on a theme starting with the letter F. Things like fear, fundamentalism, and free love.
We'll share stories from our lives and our distinct generational perspectives, and we'll look to the experts for insights and ideas.
Today we're going to talk about fatherhood. Everybody has or had one, whether or not he provided all that you had hoped for.
We'll talk about our own fathers and the fathers of our children, and we'll look at what the experts say these days about how to be a dad.
In fact, today we are welcoming the founder of the humor platform, How to Be a Dad. Charlie Capen wrote about fatherhood for some 10 years and is the co-author of The Guide to Baby Sleep Positions, Survival Tips for Co-Sleeping Parents. Charlie, welcome. I knew you as a child. I knew your father and your mother, and it's really awesome to see you here as not only a full-fledged adult, but a father and an expert on fatherhood. Who knew? Welcome.
Semi-fledged, yeah.
Semi-fledged, right. What does fledged mean anyway? I don't even know. So what made you write about fatherhood? How did this all come to be?
Well, you knew my father. My father passed away in 2005. My first child was born in 2009. I was part of sort of that early blogosphere, I guess. I really leaned on, and my wife leaned on a lot of amazing writers, and most of whom were women. And their stories and their advice and their vulnerability really helped us navigate the pregnancy and then, our child being born. But I didn't have him to draw on, and it really became clear that I needed to document certain things and all these questions I had or all these feelings I was experiencing, to be able to put them down for later use. So I initially started sort of video blogging before that was really a thing, just to have documentation to be able to talk about it. The tricky part was I had this one-way dialogue with him throughout the process. And, growing up, I think my mom really was the provider and caretaker. He gave me other gifts, but my mom really, I think, taught me how to be a father in a lot of ways. But this one-way sort of conversation, I really wanted to ask myself hard questions and document the hard stuff and the fun stuff. And so that led to what if there were a platform for parents in general? And what if we made fun of the stress and fear of parenting rather than like watching people sort of decry different ideologies or different ways of doing it? And secretly in my heart, I wanted to sort of use humor as sort of an anesthesia to get in and do surgery on men because they were not so willing to be taught. And I felt fit that category too. So coming up with a humor platform allowed me to both sort of meditate on what it meant to be a father and all of my mistakes and be self-deprecating about it and be honest. And then that opened up the door for a lot of men to sort of finally find a platform that they loved. And in the beginning, really, it was, parent blogging and influencing the influencer sort of world came from women. And to enter into that space, I knew I also had to pay homage to the work that they had done to build the space. So the reason we became big at all and got all these great opportunities from that platform was because of women. And they shared our stuff and then would share it with the men in their lives. And then suddenly it sort of like bled into all sorts of corners of the world.
So let me jump back for just a minute and say that Charlie grew up in a family where media was the way that people expressed themselves. Charlie's dad was one of the funniest men I've ever met in my life, one of the most brilliant writers. Charlie Capen, for those of you who either lived in the Bay Area in the 80s or in the Boston area in the 70s. Stephen was a radio guy, and but just deep and funny and political, and I was his news person. And so we did the morning show together on KSAN in San Francisco. And we were close friends, and Charlie's mom as well worked at the radio station with us. And you were the first baby born in our friend group. So I have a really deep and special connection to you. And someday I'll show you all the old home movies that I still have, right?
I mean, I have photos of you holding me like all over the place. And there was like, I remember even being on Church Street or on 21st and like you guys both being regular installations at our house, and that's so
Oh
cool.
yeah, watching really crazy movies like what's that one, Red Rum? I'm like having all these.
There was a lot of movies played that, yeah, my dad had a habit of playing some really gnarly content in front of me as a
Oh yeah,
kid.
well there was no sense
Fine.
that right. So here's the thing, as you say, your mom was kind of like running the show. I mean, this is my recollection
Yeah.
in terms of what does a child need, right? Some structure, food, like basic
Yeah.
time of this.
People coming over for parties and illicit things happening in front of me when I was a toddler. No big
Right. And
deal.
your dad
Cool.
was just doing himself. I mean, and he was
Always.
taking you along for the ride, and you were not his first child. So, right. It was all happening. Um,
Yeah.
I want to talk about what we think of as sort of this image of a father and what that's supposed to be and where we got that. Gabby, any thoughts?
Well, we do live in a patriarchy. So I think that the idea of fatherhood is really complicated, and it's, I mean, I think that we all still have this kind of old-fashioned idea of, a 1950s dad coming home at the end of the day and, I don't know, having a martini while his children sit at his feet. But we also have learned collectively a lot more about child development and what kids need. And I feel like it's really interesting. I had a really good dad. He's still alive. Still a good dad. But I don't think he knew to be. It's crazy watching my children. I have two kids, 18 months and 4.5, or 19 months and 4.5. And my husband is so attuned and so involved in their everything that they do. And I don't know that was really, it's kind of a funny way to put it, but I don't know that was really on trend when I was growing up, and certainly not before. But it's like we have this idea of what a dad is, and I don't know that it necessarily has been updated to fully include everything that kids need, if that makes sense.
Well, I think also there was the stereotype of what the mom was,
Right.
and that is no longer the case either. So the division of labor was so clear when economics would allow, right, that mom was at home, mom was in charge of the home, dad was the provider. That isn't always the case. Often now, the role of provider is split, and the role of who takes care of the home is split.
There's literal labor, and then there's also what Charlie was talking about, emotional labor. Which parent do the kids go to when they have a problem? Who's the nurturer? I think that there are a lot of reasons why kids sometimes gravitate toward their moms for when they need nurturing. That may have to do with in the case of biological parents of having carried a baby inside of you and then nursed, and all those early initial connections that parents and kids make. But I think it's sort of, we've decided that moms are the nurturing ones, and therefore that's who the kid should go to when they're sad or hurt or scared or upset. And I think that increasingly fathers are starting to think about ways of bringing that forward in their parenting as well.
Yeah, I think there's a clearer desire for men to self-define what those roles are. I think men also have a lot of skill sets that they want to bring to bear, and they just need that invitation in a lot of cases, and then also to do that work and carry that emotional labor themselves. I don't know, Joanne, if you remember, there was a show called Pacific Currents back when I was little, and my father decided to take time off from radio and take care of me as like the sole provider at home while my mom went back to work. And it was like I'll send you the clips too. They treat it like it's a circus sideshow. It's so strange and foreign and exotic to everybody that he would say no to a being the breadwinner and choose to stay at home with me and take me to the park. And it's very nostalgic to watch it. Even the music is very syrupy. It's like a look at this guy, and they're talking about masculinity. They're talking about the role of men in households, and he was also really invested in Robert Bly and the work that Robert Bly was doing, and so trying to really define masculinity for himself. And I think he was really plagued by the concept of like being emasculated and feeling like he didn't know. So he would explore all these different avenues. But I think those generations of early at-home fathers and stay-at-home fathers broke way to men slowly but surely learning that they can define their role within the partnership that they have, or as a single father, or as two gay dads, that you have a choice in bringing your talent to and your love of things and your passion for things to your children in ways that maybe that blur or break those boundaries.
Here's an interesting thought. Maybe I grew up obviously in an era where that, in the 1950s, and my dad was nothing like that stereotype. My dad had been an artist, had to give up his art form, which was concert violin, and become a window washer because that's what his dad did. And his dad had a stroke and he had to take over the business, and he was completely ill-suited in every way to what he ended up doing, and was, really lost himself. And so he was not at all that sort of strong figure. You wait till your dad gets home. None of that. He was the soft and squishy one. And my mom was the, person who ran the show. And I'm wondering if maybe we don't have to have a specific notion of what mother is and what father is, but rather what parent is. And if we really think of what parent is, and you have one or two people playing that role, or maybe three in some families, who knows, because we seem to be redefining the family. One brings whatever skills one has sort of to the table and gives that. So for some of us, it may be, here's how to organize your life, right? Here's how to structure time. Where for some other people, time is something very different. I don't know. I'm just going to put that out there as an idea for the two of you. So, what do you think?
I also think that it's about inevitably in most situations in a 2+ parent household. It's also a partnership thing. Of course, like we all should be bringing the gifts that we have to share, but also, when two people decide to bring another human or multiple humans into the world and run a household together, even if they don't necessarily have those gifts naturally, and I think this is where we're starting to see changes in what in what we expect of dads. All of the tasks have to get done. And so it's inextricably linked for me to, it's not just that dads are deciding that now's the time to finally start nurturing their children, but also that their partners, in many cases women, are saying, I am nurtured out, okay? I'm nurturing everyone in this house, including you, sir. So grab a pillow and a book and help me out here. And I think that as fathers, good, this is going to sound really corny, but like good, and I, of course, these labels are placeholders, edit as needed, but good fathers, we think good husbands are good fathers, but good fathers are good husbands, because or good co-parents, because being a good parent and being a devoted parent is, of course, a universally rewarding thing. But when it never ceases to amaze me when I run into somebody who knows that I have kids and they ask me who they're with right now, because nobody asks my husband who's with his children. No. Like, they just assume it's me. And I'm, it's like, well, they're with their father or wherever they are, none of your business. But knowing part of my I have pride not only in the fact that, I married a guy who is good to our kids, but I also feel good that I married a guy who is invested in protecting my time. I'm a writer, and I don't always have time during the week to write because I'm the primary person at home for most of what the kids have going on: drop off, pick up, nap time, etc. And he feels strongly about protecting my work time and finding places for me to get it whenever he can be home to take over for that stuff. And it's like, it's not just that he's choosing to spend time with them, it's also that he's choosing to balance our time more equitably. And so I think that's important.
Yeah, I think there's the sword cutting both ways. Is we lionize fathers for the bare minimum, and then we like make fun of dads as being children, and like, oh, he's such an idiot, bumbling fool. So both of those are anti-women, in my opinion. Both of those deride both men and women, and the women who choose those partners, but also we put men in boxes. When sorry, I'm going to name drop for 5 seconds.
Please do.
Because I had no business being there. I spoke at the White House on a topic that I was really passionate about. And it was about breaking down gender stereotypes. And I was invited to sort of speak on behalf of parents about how we're working to dismantle gender stereotypes and teach our children. So it was a day full of panels from researchers and experts and academics and brands from every major brand that you can think of about how they're treating gender stereotyping.
Wait, which administration was this, Charlie?
It was not the Hellmouth administration. It was the one before it, for the record. No, not the Goblin administration. And we were all really revitalized by that conversation. But I expected most of the day to be talking, because there was a lot of focus and emphasis on girls and women. But it quickly became apparent that every single person said, we have not enough research on boys. We have not enough research on boys, and that we are failing boys. And so we each spoke about, what we're doing to do that. So it was like the head of Smart Girls, Amy Poehler Smart Girls, and we had, DC and Disney and all these different people and these amazing academics. But it was really clear that the social emotional learning and the emotional IQ, like the EQ that we're giving boys, we're setting people up for failure in those institutions, because we're not teaching them about empathy and nurturing and care and how that can take place. And also, we say boys are simple and girls are complex. The moment a boy has a complex emotion, they're like, there's something really wrong with me. Like, what is happening? I don't understand.
You must be gay.
You don't give them tools. Yeah, it must be gay or effeminate or wait, maybe I'm wrong and bad and depressed and want to hurt myself. So with women and girls, they had a completely different silo of what was happening for women and girls. For boys, it was simply like no tools, no training, no teaching, no expression. And then we put them in context where they need to do that emotional labor with kids, or they need to be nurturing, or they need to be empathetic. And they have a really narrow window of tools to be able to do that. So the conversations I saw happening amongst men and dads in the communities I did when I was writing about it for 10 years was a lot of men who were trying to push that conversation forward, and I feel like my dad would have benefited from this kind of community, was men talking about how when the baby was born, they had no emotional connection to the baby. They're like, look, it's a hairy potato. Like, they literally didn't have any emotional feeling about their child until age 1 or 2, just being really open and honest, and then not feeling like they were wrong or bad for not having the sort of hallmark experience with children, especially at first, because Mark Twain talks endlessly about how children are like a blessing and bother, like infinite blessing and bother. But we didn't have platforms for that for men for a long time.
Yeah. I always think whenever I hear something about how boys are so simple and so easy, it's kind of like, well, if you ignore the complex, complicated parts of them, then yeah, I guess they are easy. Like if you just, girls are complex because, and this is obviously a complicated statement as well, but we we expect them to have big feelings, and so we listen more. But you're totally right. We assume there's something wrong with a boy. He has.
And how insulting to say that boys are simple. We'll be right back after these messages. We're talking about fatherhood today with Charlie Capen, who did a deep dive into fatherhood, and it doesn't end, does it, Charlie? How old are your kids now?
Well, my eldest is 12, turning 13 in October, and my youngest is 8.
So what is being a father like now for you?
Oh, man. Well, let's see. Where do I start? Tweenhood is an adventure that you have been through. There's simplicity in those early days. That idea that the days are long and the years are short is really hitting me. Turning 40, having those existential crises and watching them grow up. I think I'm more fixated on the future than I've ever been. In the beginning, it's like keep them alive, and then as you get older and older, the concept of like keep them alive then becomes like let them survive and thrive beyond me. So a lot of the focus now is really on these like deep teachings, and I go for walks with my eldest like every night with the dog, and we go for like a mile or two walk, and those are so special because those are such great anchor points now for deep conversation that if I were to go up to them and be like, hey, how was your day? They'd say, whatever. But because we have these conversations, like walking and talking, especially, I don't know if it's just for men, but for me, it's a special and kind of spiritual time because walking and speaking is a very old practice. And what's karma? Can I give someone else karma if they're a bad person? Like all these really cool ethical questions, but it's a lot less about the like, do they have a fever? Are they fed? Like those things, and more about where am I guiding this human being and how can I listen better all the time?
Beautiful.
It's hard.
Beautiful. I often have referenced that when they're little, it's physically exhausting. You are just physically exhausted. But as they get older and the problems become more nuanced, and you realize that you have this tiny window where you are of influence, and then that's going to be right out the window. And so that's emotionally draining in a way, and burdensome. And you're right, actually, now at the precipice of where they start taking big risks, and you're like, oh no, what's going to happen? And so there's that worry coming.
Yeah, I get that 1,000-yard stare just thinking about it. It's they're such interesting people too. Like they've really come into their own in so many ways, and I know they're still evolved. But I mean, I think about all the things I put my parents through, and then like how do I evolve, or how do I be the person I needed in those moments? Like there's such interesting funhouse. I have this theory that the things I have the hardest time with my kids are things that I haven't really resolved in myself. They're like funhouse mirrors of me that take me on these journeys that I have to like
Can you
really
give us
sit
a
with
for
myself.
instance?
Do I want to? No, absolutely not. Why would I reveal anything about myself? And also, the other thing about the whole blogging thing is part of the reason I sort of segued out of it was realizing that they have stories that they're going to need to tell, and I shouldn't tell them. But I will say, my sensitivities and my attachment and my feeling out of place as a child and as a teen, especially, like I always felt completely out of place and like something was wrong. And if I can help guide them through that successfully, I feel like I'll have done a big part of my job.
I wonder if any teen ever goes through anything more than a minute or two of feeling in place. I mean, I think that feeling of being different, of there's something wrong with me, for some reason is part of the passage that we all have to go through at that time.
It's when you have to identify. I have a personal theory about development in that phase, which is that that is when you find out how weird you are. And of course, like you're far actually less weird than you think that you are, but you have kind of a choice. There becomes a fork in the road, and you can either lean into your weirdness or you can avoid it and kind of close yourself off from it. And it sort of depends, I think, on how your emergence into adulthood goes.
Well, I'm far weirder than I look. And also, I think Embracing Your Weird, there's actually a book called Embrace Your Weird from a friend, Felicia Day, that she has little exercises on how to embrace that weirdness, which I love. I think it's so easy for us as parents to want our kids to conform in so many ways, especially like during that White House panel, they talked a lot about female normative behavior. This sort of like rubric for behavior being a quiet, like emotionally sensitive young girl, being the blueprint for which that's also super layered as well, because women are not that, like that's a monolithic concept. But to put that rubric also on boys in all the iterations that boys can take feels like we're setting people up for failure. There's so much more than that. So yeah, I agree with you, Joanne. I don't know that anyone necessarily feels in place, but I don't know if it was also having a weird father. My father was very weird. I mean, I remember like I had this moment. I don't know if I ever told you this, Joanne. He picked me up from Mill Valley Middle School. He forgot to pick me up, and he was late.
I'm not surprised.
And I know. Well, this is the not surprising part. And let me tell me if this is more surprising as it unfolds. So he was late. He had been in the shower, and this moment literally changed the way I see embarrassment. It changed. It was such a gift and such a horror show. He got out of the Volvo in a towel, just a towel, in front of middle school to pick me up in my little skater jeans and my stuff. And I was like, Dad, get in the car. Like my soul left my body in front of these people. Like so that exorcised my shame and embarrassment in a lot of ways. So I'm deeply grateful for it, but also at the time I could not process it.
Oh, God. I love that story so much. I see it happening. I wish I had been there with what were they called? Camcorders. So I could have captured it, because that was so your father, right? To just, first of all, because it's like, oh, I thought of it right now, but then also he thought that would be funny.
I couldn't begin to describe what I thought he was thinking, what I think he was thinking. I think
Oh, I know. He thought that was funny. He thought that was really funny. There's no question in my mind.
His hair was sopping. He's in a towel. He's like, ah. I was like, he's in the car. Like, there's no amount. And I could literally, like, I did theater and all these different things. I could literally be naked on stage and not be as embarrassed as that moment.
Of course, because middle school's the worst. Oh my God.
It is the worst.
It's the worst. Your parents merely open their mouths and the smell that comes out is embarrassing. And just every single thing about them.
I
look
at my perfect little sweet babies sometimes, and I think about the fact that they are just going to absolutely hate me one day. And it's going to be good, because it's going to mean that they feel safe enough to hate me. And that's a good thing. But
and may you sit in that moment and say, oh my God, we're here now. Like, cause this happened to me. I was like, oh my God, we're here. The screaming is happening. The expression is there. That weaning, whatever that is, that moment of individuating from all of this starts happening. And to have the presence of mind to go, it's happening. There it is. And for me, those walks, like I just said, all right, that moment when we're like walking, we're like by each other's sides and walking, can we just drop back into that moment for a second? Because I can't work with, well, then for him to be able to see that has been like creating those anchors for them to come back around. That's all I can do. Cause I have this feeling like teen and tweenhood is going to be, how like when something orbits around the moon in one of those movies and like we've lost radio contact or whatever, that dark side of the moon, you're just waiting for them to come back around at some point. I think that's how I sort of visualize it in my mind.
Yeah. There's got to be a certain amount of faith or hope or whatever. It's like you plant seeds,
Yeah.
right? And you water them, and then hopefully they grow. Hopefully, and they
and constantly second guess yourself the
oh
entire way.
well, 1,000%. But then, of course, they have to have material to talk about with their therapist at some point in the future. So you have to realize
I just hope they have a good book.
Right? You're giving them material. So how do we, in general, I think people parent the way their parents parented or the exact opposite. I'm curious to know from each of you how much you took from the parenting you received to apply to your own parenting, and how much of it you found from whatever books, the internet, experts.
Do you want to go first, Gabby? I feel like you're so much smarter than I am.
I guess so. I had great parents, and parenting is hard. And I am a super sensitive person, and I think that the way that discipline was approached was really different in the 80s and 90s. And I've gotten really into gentle parenting as a concept. We can link some resources for that. And essentially it's about treating your child as a human being who needs to be respected and given appropriate autonomy, but also needs to have their feelings acknowledged and held. I think my parents tried to do that, but also it was like what you were supposed to do with kids was really different back then. It was a lot more about getting them to comply and obey. And my dad lost his temper a lot. And one thing that I really like about gentle parenting is that it's almost less for my kids than it is for me. It's like a script. And when the temptation to yell at one's children is omnipresent, like it really happens, especially I've got a 4.5-year-old who's got a problem with everything. And she's really smart. So she's a lot to say. And she comes up with like creative ways to tell me to get out of her face. And I can hear in my head what my dad might have said in one of those moments. And it's like, I have to choose that moment to pick something else. I have to choose that moment to do something different, to break a cycle. And it is so hard. The work of parenting is so difficult, but it's like the most restorative thing I could do for that little person inside of me.
That's so awesome. Wow.
Amen. What about you, Charlie?
To echo Gabby, I think part of the process is undoing the transferred trauma of our parents. I bring my mother's dogged determinism, that Irish work ethic, and that desire to like create magical experiences. She gave us so many magical experiences through really hard times and really stressful things, and them splitting, and single parenthood and dangerous times in San Francisco, and then unsure circumstances. She had no let up about anything ever. And that my sort of at a certain point in my life, my procrastination and laziness, and parenting is such a clarifying and maddening thing, because it can show you how self-obsessed you are in some really stark ways, or how willing you are to go the extra mile because you're required. And that, I think, was really taught by my mom. My father, there are moments, I definitely see my father in myself when I get upset and frustrated. He would like throw shit out the window in the car because had felt like we had too much stuff. Like that was, he would reach a breaking point, and then it was just like, he was done. When I feel myself reaching those places, I have to make a choice whether I react in the same way or not. And he was also super sort of distanced from the establishment. So there's always a little part of me that fights the two sides of my mother and father. But I think the synthesis between those two things is what helps. I think children are healthy within single parent households, but I think they also have a tough time because they have to be all the things. And then my mom, because she's a brilliant woman, made sure that I had great male role models in a lot of different contexts. Not because I was missing a father, but because I needed men to show me things about myself. And my father really gave me that, like, a little FU, and a little creativity, and like not putting up with things. His creativity, like you said, Joanne, he was brilliant and funny and magnetic, but also really tortured. So me sitting with myself and my torturedness is like me working on him in a lot of ways. So I don't know. I mean, it's a long way of saying it, but I want to carry their gifts with me, and I want to relieve their suffering and not pass it on to my children as best I
So
can.
profound. I want to end this episode with some research that I did that I think is fascinating, and I'm curious to know what each of you would think of this. This idea of what makes a great father, everybody has a list. And so I have sort of the top 10 from a website called Ask Men, what makes a great father. And then for some reason, it's a top 9 from a site called Mom Junction. So, and some of these, right? Very scientific. It's extremely scientific. And some of them overlap. So according to Ask Men, a great father, and I hesitate to say these are in any order, any particular order, but I'm just going to run through them. A great father teaches his children to appreciate things so they don't just treat him like an ATM. He's open-minded. He allows his kids to be citizens of their own day and age. He accepts that his kids aren't exactly like him. He spends quality time with his children, having fun, listening, chatting, helping. He leads by example, and examples of that are showing love for their mother, not drinking a lot, being kind. He's supportive and loyal. He is their defender, disciplines them in private, provides a safety net. He challenges his kids, lets them face setbacks and resolve conflicts. He teaches them lessons, skills, and qualities. He protects his family no matter what, and he shows unconditional love. Sound like a good package?
Does it feel like a different list than what you would say a good mother is?
To me, no. It's interesting. We live in this really tricky time where the definition of not just father and mother, but also of parent and of woman and man is so rewritten. It's a beautiful moment, and it's also a little chaotic because the unsaid needs for all parties involved, depending on sexuality and identity, like, that's all up for grabs right now, which is a great place to be, where there's an opportunity. But it also can be very confusing for people who live in old models, or who don't know how to advocate for their needs or understand other people's needs. So it requires more, that we do more to understand ourselves and like be there. I love all of those things. I think, if we take the binary of masculine and feminine, and say we are both of those things in varying degrees depending on who we are. I don't know that I would describe all of those necessarily, because a lot of those things describe my mom growing up. I think, I have things that I've written out for myself that are masculine things that I think I want to teach my children, regardless of their identity or who they are or any of it. So, but the biggest thing that I think for boys and me is witnessing how men treat women firsthand with my mom, and understanding that if we're going to do anything about equality, that boys and men have to take down walls that have been built by men and boys. So that work has to be done from men to boys in a big way. So partnering, providing all those things without removing the contribution of women to all of those things as well.
Well put.
I mean, I think it's beautiful the way you describe this moment in time. I think a lot about the word fluidity. I think roles are more and more fluid. I think there's tremendous opportunity there. But as you say, there can also be confusion and chaos because of that. When I look at this list that Mom Junction put out, they seem to be these qualities or traits of being a good father seem to be more sort of the traditional masculine. Like the first one is he is protective. Drawing clear boundaries, considering their best interests, talking to them about things they should be aware of, putting things in their place. The second one is affection, is his middle name. He lets the children know they can count on him. Third, a wall of trust and security. Children often believe that their father is always right, that he will never lie to them, betray them, leave them in the lurch. Their father is there whenever they want some help or are in trouble. The source of encouragement. Your words have the power to make or break them. This is so much responsibility, right? Has the patience to listen, provides the necessities of life. And mind you, while this perfect father is doing all of this, he is also balancing everything else that's going on in life, right? Everything from global warming to, racial injustice to economic stresses to, is the power going to go out any minute because it's 105 for the fourth day in a row? Yeah, right. He is also providing the necessities of life, be it a home, food, education, love, security, attention. He respects the mother of his children. And I think that one absolutely critical, whether or not he is in a relationship with the mother of his children. That is key. A good father teaches his children how to respect their mother. And spending time with him is fun for kids. And he is the best teacher, or at least a great teacher. I don't know. Are there differences in those two approaches, or were they pretty parallel?
I almost wonder, it's almost like it depends on what lens or what filter you hear those ideas through. Like if it's if one is reading this list, if one comes to this list with from a place of I'm not feeling like a great father, or I don't know the first thing about being a father, and it sounds like it's very much from a point of view rather than like an actual methodology around what goes into becoming a good father. Like those things are all true. I would also say that those things are most of those things are things I'm striving to toward in being a good mother. So. Yeah, I think it's a good list. I think that we each individually and collectively could also expand on it.
Agreed. I mean, I think the roles and characteristics definitely can be genderless. I also think it really depends on the partnering. The partnering is at its core what sustains life. Whether that's partnering with a community that helps you through those times if you're by yourself, or with a partner in your home, or co-parenting, or however that looks. That was always something I got like a little, when men would kind of go like, what about dads and men? I was like, you literally own every other thing in the world, and you're like trying to take over a parenting conversation because you feel butthurt about you not being talked about more, whatever. There's a domineering element to masculinity, and I think the bigger thing is looking at these lists and saying, which qualities do I have? Where do we meet in the middle and share those? And where do we complement? I've seen plenty of protective mothers. I mean, there's nothing like a protective mother, in my opinion. I've seen it and been protected by one in scary circumstances. There's nothing like that. Can men be protective? Should they be protective? Yes. But I think one doesn't negate the other. My father was very playful and affectionate and taught me to be that way with my kids. So my kids get the benefit of that. But if I were to put that on a list and be like, affection is a female quality wherein they play with, like, there's an artificial or arbitrary nature to that. So knowing what you are, who you are, what you stand for, what you get, like what gifts you have, where you're working on, what is not working, how you fall short. All of those investments in that conversation and that in-depth look and that attention, and then bringing that to the relationship with children pay dividends later. The more, and I was an at-home dad with my first child for 8 months, 8 months. And that shifted our relationship, and it pays dividends now because we have a deeper connection because I chose that route. So that's the thing I say to dads everywhere is just know that any investment you put in before the baby's born, in the very early days especially, there's tons of research on it now. Early investment and presence in children's lives change them. So reap those benefits later by being there early.
Amen. So we agree that fatherhood and let's just call it parenthood even though it doesn't start with an F, is the hardest thing we ever do. And
parenthood. Yeah.
Right. Parenthood. And humor gets us through.
I mean,
100%. Actually, I have a picture.
Yeah. Sure.
Do you want to see a picture?
Yeah.
Of me and my dad. Hold on a second.
Can you tell us what we're looking at for those who...
Yes. So this is my father smiling at me, who is also smiling on the couch that had the best cushions of all time. I don't know if that's going to be in focus. We're both laughing. And the idea is that we can, for he and I, the special connection with speaking in languages that no one else spoke, laughing at things that no one else would laugh at, and creating that love, like that love language and language with my kids.
And we're all works in progress. I love that you said that. And I think this notion of kids thinking that their father is always right, I think it's probably better to say that dad is trying his best, or, dad is telling you the truth as he understands it at this very moment. It's not that dad is always right, or anybody is always right, or anybody ever has all the answers. We're doing the best we can.
Amen.
Charlie, thanks so much for being here with us today. It's just a pleasure to see you. And I think that you had a whole lot of wisdom that you were able to share about what it means to be a great dad. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to All the F Words. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts. We hope you follow us and rate us and tell us what you want to hear more of. Gabby?
We are also on social media. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at allthefwordspod. And you can email us. We are allthefwordspod@gmail.com. Tell us about your dad or your moms or your own kids. We want to hear about it.
Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye.